Hello and welcome. Let's start with our top story this hour. After concluding his two-day visit to France, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has now arrived in the UAE as a part of his extensive diplomatic tour. The agenda of the day-long visit is expected to be energy, food security and defense. Prime Minister Modi will hold talks with UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Both the leaders enjoy a good personal rapport, which is reflected in their frequent engagements. Ties between both nations are based on economic, defense cooperation and people-to-people linkages and have seen a significant boost in recent years. Last year, a comprehensive economic partnership agreement was signed between the nations. The trade volume between the two nations has now reached historic highs, surging from $72.9 billion in the fiscal year of 2021 to 22 to $84.5 billion in the fiscal year 2022 to 23. This is a remarkable year-on-year increase of 16%. While another important aspect is defense cooperation, which has seen steady growth in recent years. There have been regular military exchanges at the highest level. Both countries have regularly conducted joint naval exercises and port calls. Prime Minister Modi's visit is also expected to build ties in various domains like education, healthcare and security. It will also be an opportunity to discuss cooperation on global issues, particularly in the context of UAE's presidency of COP28 and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, as well as India's G20 presidency, where the UAE is a special invitee. Now, for more on this, we have with us Shraddha Bhandari, the CEO of Confluence Consultants and a geopolitical expert, joining us live from Dubai. Thank you for being with us. Now, as someone who watches geopolitics closely, what is the significance of Indian Prime Minister Modi's meetings with the UAE leadership?
So thank you for having me here. I'm often teased by my friends that I should be the brand ambassador of the India-UAE relationship because, it's the complementarities in this relationship are mind-boggling. I don't think people realize how rare India-UAE relationship is in its geopolitical world based on trade, economics, people-to-people contact. And it's really, stress-free from a lot of other geopolitical angles that other relationships face. So I think Prime Minister Modi's visit with His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, whom in very cruisish terms we call MBZ, is really going to build on what has been achieved in the last couple of years, right? So you've mentioned some of the key highlights. The economic relationship has been strengthened by the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that was signed during COVID in 88 days, which was UAE's first CEPA across the world. The trade volumes have already hit $84 billion. They were supposed to be about $100 billion in 5 years. UAE has the largest Indian diaspora in the world. So about 40% of the Indian population in the UAE is Indian. And I can say living here that this just feels like I'm in India. There are a lot of top business houses in India, in the UAE that are Indians. There are a number of UAE companies, for example, DP World, that have invested in the logistics parks in India. Emirates carries a bulk of its revenues from being the connect between the subcontinent and this region and then Europe and US. So the sort of ties are going to be built and taken forward at the government level. Energy is one of the key areas that both UAE and India are looking at. They're looking at defense and strategic partnerships. They're together in the I2U2, which is India, US, UAE, and Israel. So all of these cooperations are going to be sort of looked at. I don't think there's going to be anything path-breaking, but it's going to build on everything that's been achieved in the last couple of years, which has been tremendous.
Right. Absolutely. And with the focus on energy, defense ties and security, the partnership is seen as a win-win for both sides. And help us understand what is in it for Modi and what is in it for the UAE leader Al Nahyan.
So I think from a government perspective, these three are really being driven, though at other levels, fintech, digital payments, metaverse, etc., are also happening at a startup and people-to-people level. So for energy, of course, UAE is like the third largest exporter of traditional fossil fuels to India in the region. There have been a lot of constructive talks on, for example, green hydrogen. We have a couple of Indian entrepreneurs and companies and innovation experts who have looked at these initiatives in the UAE. There are talks about electricity grid based on renewables between India and the UAE. In terms of defense and security, the underlying concern in all of these countries is essentially defense indigenization, right? And also strategic items indigenization, whether it's semiconductors, etc. So when I talk to funds here, when I talk to startups here, there is a growing awareness that India, the UAE, and the GCC corridor can be that manufacturing hub where synergies can come together for original equipment manufacturers. For example, the more advanced defense systems, whether that's the F-16s, the Apache, the Chinooks. From the Indian side, BrahMos and Tejas are two sort of defense offerings for sale to this region. We've seen it with India, Egypt, and Tejas, and now UAE and India talking about BrahMos. And so they've been, as you said, the joint exercises, the UAE forces, because the country is so small that people often tend to ignore that it has one of the best and most fastest growing defense forces in the world, right? So they're doing a lot of joint exercises with India. Desert Flag is one of the key operations, and then there's also a UAE joint India ministerial level defense committee that's been talking about joint ventures. So, for example, between UAE's Edge company, which is one of the prime most defense manufacturers with India's HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, they've signed a number of agreements at the IDEX, which is UAE's one of the largest defense forums that is happening in February 2022. So all of those things are happening. There are UAE companies that are setting up in the Make in India campaign in defense and security. So along with this, food security is something which is also part of the I2U2 framework. So there is emphasis, for example, on hydroponics. I meet a lot of Indian origin and Indian startup entrepreneurs who are looking to set up hydroponics in the UAE and the larger regions. So very, very interesting synergies. But I still think there is a long way to go in these three aspects. The relationship gets strengthened by the other aspects as well.
Right. And Shraddha, with the UAE chairing the COP28 and India chairing the G20, how are the major global powers looking at this relationship?
What I found really interesting was that Prime Minister Modi visited US a couple of weeks ago, and on his way back stopped at Egypt. Now he's gone to France. On his way back, he's stopping at the UAE. I don't know whether it's coincidental or it's a deliberate policy, but it's setting the stage that Global South is now as important as the West in terms of how India sees its relationship with the world. So yes, COP28 is India has a special place to play in the green energy transitions in the world, and with the G20, the UAE is a special invitee. So being based in the UAE, I mean, I think this country, given its size, has hosted an amazing amount of road shows for the G20. For the COP28, there are a lot of things emerging within the green initiative. I think there is a recognition that these two countries can take the lead in the Global South narrative, show to the world how cooperation can sort of transcend the confrontation we're seeing in the global world today with the superpower rivalries. And UAE that way is their projection is very, very sophisticated. They have projected themselves as a country which is neutral, which is open to everyone who wants to do constructive things in the region. And India is also sort of positioning itself that it can also have a dialogue with Russia. It can have a dialogue with the US. It can be a strategic partner to France. So I think it can, if it's developed in the right way, it's sort of a long-term relationship. But there's just one thing I'd like to point out before I end is this region is very fundamentally changing in terms of its power projection. We've always had a US security umbrella which sort of guaranteed how this region operated. But now the countries have come up on its own. So we see Saudi Arabia pivoting a little bit towards China, whether it's just to sort of get back at the US or that's a strategic relationship, we'll see. We have Turkey, which is sort of at least politically strategizing towards our neighbor, Pakistan. India has that relationship with the UAE, but it also has to look at a larger power in the region, which it can help with power projection. So I think Egypt is one of the countries that India is very strategically looking at. So the relationship with UAE it remains,
Yes.
but we are also now looking at other players in the region besides just oil or exports or trade. So yeah, that's a change.
Absolutely. Right. Shraddha, thank you very much for your very razor-sharp analysis and all your insights there.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.